This session is going to focus on connections and specifically the ability for FME to better cope year on year with data extraction and data loading because the connectivity that it has for a multitude of formats and systems. The first thing to see is that some of you are going to be aware that the journey always starts with FME Desktop and specifically with Workbench. And that's the tool that you can see now. First, you build a workspace to connect and transform your data. FME Workbench is the authoring environment where you build your workflows and you can inspect the data along the way too. The next step then is to run the job. You can do that in FME Desktop, or you can automate it with FME Server or with FME Cloud. And what you can see here is the automations interface in FME Server, which was new in FME 2019, but has been significantly enhanced this year. FME gives you the capability to trigger data processing as a result of an event. So for example, an email might arrive and some data attached to it needs to be loaded into your database, or maybe when a database record is updated, you need that data to be synchronized across the business or any other systems you've got. So that's what I mean by automating your processes. But you're not going to get very far if you can't connect to your data, either on the way into your process or on the way out. Thankfully, FME does formats, so it also has the best support for spatial data. There are hundreds of formats natively supported, many different types of connection, and thousands of APIs are accessible. And all of that as long as you have the right authentication, of course. So we're going to have a look at a few of them. To do that, I need to go and find a web browser, which I hopefully have hiding somewhere. There we go. So if I bring that in, I'm going to go to safe.com/formats. And it's a little quick URL to take you to Safe's format or integration page. And you can see all of the formats that are supported in FME. You can go and type the name of the format you care about. So it might be, something to do with Esri, and you can see there's a whole raft of Esri related formats. It might be something to do with Microsoft. You can put in a vendor name in here as well as a format. There's good old Excel, which many people are familiar with, so that's the one I'll choose. You get a dedicated page, tells you a little bit about what you can do. There may be specific webinars. There's an ebook here that you can go and download. There is, importantly, at the bottom of the page, a table that shows you what the compatibility is, and specifically whether you can read and or write that format, and what platforms you're able to do that on. The other thing about this page is that if you step back to that original page, one click, in the top left-hand corner where you can see my cursor, there is a formats matrix. And those of you who've used FME in a bit more detail may know that there are different editions of FME, which means that it can read and write different formats. Depending on the edition you've got, you can see here is a list of all of the different formats, and the R means read and the W means write. So there's all the formats that you can get to. This chart shows you the data types that have been added into the FME product over the years. Right at the beginning, you can see that pretty much the main thing people bought FME for, and the reason why it is in existence, is because it was to deal with the CAD to GIS, GIS to CAD data round trip. But increasingly, people are processing spreadsheets and data that's in the cloud and databases and building information models and data that is from sensors and Internet of Things devices. Gaming platforms are creeping into FME, and in a lot of our industry, it's pushing the way that things are being done in the tech industry from the gaming side of things. We've just heard about business intelligence tools as an integration type to different data you might have in a visualization tool, and then we're seeing different types of reality turn up, augmented, mixed, visual, machine learning turning up as well, and more on those latter topics briefly later on. Connecting to applications then, there are a few new formats in FME 2020, but what we're seeing really is a bit of a change. Actually, we're finding that just adding formats into FME is much less of a thing that Safe need to do these days. Instead, we're seeing a bit of a trend starting to push towards the need to just connect to systems, and that connection is increasingly to new applications. As a result, SAFE have had to invest quite a lot of effort into sorting out connectivity protocols like OAuth, really exciting stuff like that, that actually, if SAFE can take that problem away from us, it makes it much easier for us to be able to get to those systems. So new to 2020, we've now got connectivity to things like CityWorks, that's part of the Trimble suite. FME is also capable of working with and migrating data to the Esri ArcGIS utility network data model. And there are plenty of resources now available to help with this. There's also new connectivity to Maximo, Google Cloud Services, Microsoft Dynamics, and there's more emerging all the time on the App Store for FME, and that's hub.safe.com. And I'll get into that App Store in a little bit of time. From a format perspective, though, there are quite a few new formats, as there always are, and also some updates as well. I'm going to touch on a couple of ones that I think are worthy of a little bit of extra anecdote. And the first one is this EPT format, Entwine Point Tile Reader. To demonstrate it, I'm going to go off to this USGS site, usgs.entwine.io. And if we dive over here, you can see that there's a hosting site for a large amount of data. You can see there's a tabular listing, and then there's a little map. So if we go on, zoom in on a particular one like this one here, you can see there's an extents near the Hungry Horse Reservoir. And there's a Pottery viewer and a Placio, potato, but there's Pottery, and you can see that this is a point cloud visualization tool. It's a little tool that allows you to inspect point clouds in a web browser. It's pretty awesome. And you can see that I am rendering rather a lot of dots on the screen at the moment. If I zoom in a bit, you'll actually see the definition of some of those trees as they start to appear. But that's by the by, really. This is a visualization tool to see what you're going to get into before you go and play with the data. If you do want to play with the data, you can see that I can just dive back to the original page, and there's a little EPT link here. Now that's the format. It's a JSON message, effectively. I can grab that, poke that into FME desktop, and open up a reader for EPT, add that as the URL, and go and pull that data down and filter it or do what I need to do to that data set. The other format I'm going to mention is ECW. It's had a bit of a much needed refresh. It's been about 10 years since ECW connectivity was refreshed. ECW stands for Enhanced Compression Wavelet. There you go, now you know. It allows you to store massive images of huge geographic areas, but the big downside really has been always that it's never had transparency support. So version 3 of the format introduces transparency, and now FME allows you to make these version 3 files, and also allows you to include that much needed transparency around the edges of your image as one of the options. OGC GeoPackage I'm going to mention as well. Actually, the original reader has been deprecated, and a new one's been added in. And the reason why I'm touching on it is because it's a great format for storing raster and vector data all in one format. It's also really good to use on mobile devices and sort of putting content into web pages. It makes a good portable container, basically. Now, the old reader writer, as I said, has been deprecated. The new one in FME 2020 is, as amongst other things, it's got elevation support added into it. So, bit of a change. The transformer side of things, connector transformers are a pretty common theme in the last few versions of FME. These days, they sort of do what they say on the tin. They help you connect to the service in question. Increasingly, because there's often we're often connecting via an API. These are being delivered as FME packages. I'm going to explain what that is in a little while. but I just want to touch on a couple of the new ones mentioned on this slide. The Pictera connector, it's interesting because it's basically a wrapper around the Pictera API. It allows detection of all kinds of objects on imagery, and those include buildings, cars, solar panels, trees, pavement cracks, and more really. Dimitri Barg at SAFE, he's put out a really interesting video where he used it to identify cracks on runways. That's definitely worth a watch. There's also more of a sort of file format or data access tool, the Google Cloud Storage connector. It accesses the Google Cloud Storage file storage service, and much like the Dropbox and OneDrive connectors, it allows you to upload, download, or delete files and folders, or list file and folder information from a Google Cloud Storage account. The other thing that I'm going to touch on is machine learning, because they're creeping into FME, these tools, over the past couple of years, and they're scarily clever actually, and quite a bit of fun to play with. So, you know, sort of thing you'd probably have a look at on with your home use license actually. Available from quite a few of the different vendors that you're familiar with, familiar names. So the Microsoft Camp has got Azure Text Analytics Connector, detects language. You can detect sentiment in text, and you can extract keywords. You can use the Azure Computer Vision Connector to look for objects, faces, text detection. You can use it to throw a bounding box around those features in the objects to identify them, so you can see where they are. Sort of, I don't know, where's Wally of the data world. In fact, I'm sure someone could do this. There's a thing to do. Go and do a Where's Wally with one of these tools. Amazon Comprehend connector. There's a recognition connector, which we're going to see a little bit later on. Detect objects like image contents, detect faces, provide facial descriptions. So Google's Vision connector and the Google Language connector. There's the ones that we've seen from the open source community. So the raster object detector uses the OpenCV library. So there's a few in there. Natural language processing, all worth having a look at. On to XML and JSON formats though. This is interesting because actually there are so many formats that FME supports that are backed by there's flavors of XML and JSON. So SAFE have put a lot of work into it. They've got a dedicated team to these XML formats, and they've come up with a way of working with XML called the XSD driven XML. And I'd urge you to have a look at it. There's actually going to be a webinar fairly soon that goes into a bit more detail about this, and I'm not going to try to cover it in any depth because of the enormity of the topic. I'm going to leave SAFE to do that in their session. The main thing I'm going to say though is that the new OS master map format support that is in FME 2020 has dropped out of this work, and you might say, well, Dave, master map's been supported in FME for ages. What are you going on about? Well, go and have a look. There's some writers now. So readers and writers for these layers. We've seen a number of scenarios actually why you might want to use this. And a few people have asked us a number of times actually, and one of the scenarios we repeatedly hear is where you want to take a number of OS master map GZ files, merge them together, and then use a complex polygon to clip out a non-uniform shape that spans all of those tiles, and then write them back into a standard GML structure so that the system that you've got that ingests Ordnance Survey data in its raw state just recognizes that data as normal. And rather than shipping multiple files to somebody, you give them just exactly the extents they want. So that's the use case on that side of things. Spreadsheets, who doesn't love them? Well, clearly there's a lot of people that love spreadsheets, because would you believe it, there was a SheetsCon. So 2 days of spreadsheets in March. Why weren't you there? You could be there next year if you really want to. There are 2 billion active G Suite users. That's Gmail and Docs. So Docs, in Docs there is Google Sheets. Reason why I'm touching on this now is just to give you a bit of a heads up. If there's anybody using their access to the Google Sheets via an API, via the API. It's going to break soon. The average lifespan of an API is about 18 months. So just bear that in mind when you're building any system. You can go and register with certain trackers that keep an eye on the documents to give you a heads up when they're changing. But this is going to mean that SAFE are going to provide us with a package, and that will potentially be backwards compatible to FME 2019. So you're going to get access to a new Google Sheets connector. This concept of packages is important to touch on at this point, because they are effectively a way of helping out organizations that find it hard to keep doing upgrades to the latest and greatest version of the software. So the thing I've just said about APIs being, a little bit time limited, as soon as an API changes, so many of the formats and containers and connectors that FME connects to are backed by an API. As soon as it changes, in the old days, you had to upgrade FME in order to get the authentication change that had happened. Now, a lot of things are being deployed as packages to avoid that. So you can keep the same version of FME on your machine and go and download the latest package. There's going to be restrictions across certain number of versions depending on that service and that tool. But the good thing is that you can go to the hub and go and get that packaged component. And there is a longer URL there that'll be in the slides, so you can click on it then. But that's an article that tells you all about packages, or just go into the Knowledge Center and search for packages. What you get in a package could be a data connection, it could be a transformer, it could be a reader or a writer. The Amazon S3 connector was one of the first ones that actually did exist in FME as a standard transformer. It was ripped out and replaced with a package. The emailer was also on the list. Exactly the same thing happened with that. That's now deployed in a package. The new recognition connector has been deployed as a package, and then the Google Sheets connector will arrive soon as a separate one. So that's something to bear in mind. Packaged, where you see them in the interface, if you go to quick add, you see there's a different logo in the corner there to indicate that transformer is arriving in a package. So there's the little icon there. If it's a format, you'll see it in the format gallery. There's the reader gallery, and you can see there's a little logo against it. And they basically appear exactly how a custom format always has. That's something to bear in mind. That extra little logo indicates that it's coming from a package. So I'm going to go on, have a look at this, show you where it is. So if you go and open Workbench like this, in Workbench, if you go to Tools, FME Options, and drop that down, you can see there's a little section called FME Packages down the left-hand side. And you can see here that here's a series of packages that I've got installed on my machine. There's the Amazon AI Services one. You can see there's a version number there. You can see that included inside it is the Comprehend connector and the Recognition connector, those two custom transformers. And then there may be web connections and other bits and pieces. And there's an explicit update button here, so that when the new version comes along, you can update it. There's the S3 connector. There's the emailer that I just mentioned. So you can go and grab those and pull them down, and they are available on the hub. So you can either browse them directly through the web interface, or if you go to hub.safe.com like this, and go and filter on packages, you can see that there's the S3 package, and you can go and hit download and pull down that package, and you can go and see the history and content and any comments that have been made on that package as well. So there you go, a little bit of an overview. That's it from connections. To hear a little bit more, connect to almost anything with FME. That's our webinar. It's in September, but you've already been to that page. Go and sign up for a few of our sessions. We'd love to have you on board. That's the September event.